Hello, everyone. My name is Zachary Corzine. I'm a freelance motion designer, visual designer, currently based out of San Francisco. And today I'm going to be talking about my commercial production workflow as a solo freelancer. Earlier this week, I gave a presentation on kind of personal experiments, personal explorations, but I wanted to dive into kind of some approaches as a solo freelancer. So let me first show my reels to give you a little feel for my work, and then we can dive right in. All right. Thank you so much. So today I'll be talking about freelance commercial production workflow. And I have a background in design. I transitioned to motion design in 3D just a few years ago. And about a year ago, I transitioned from full-time at an advertising agency I was at to go freelance. And both those steps have been, huge stepping stones in my career and in my life. And they were really, facilitated by the ease of use and the learning curve of Cinema 4D. So a lot of the projects that I wanted to talk about today is, I made sure to pick projects that don't use Houdini, don't use any third-party programs, and they're kind of, just using the standard tool set within Cinema 4D. So if you have a background in design, you're interested in transitioning motion design, and you're interested, or even if you're in an entirely different field and you're interested in getting into 3D, I really want to showcase how user-friendly it is, how easy it is to jump into Cinema 4D and start creating work and create a career and create a life that you can live off of, So here are some of the projects that I'll be jumping into today. This creative campaign for Odwalla, which includes this full 3D spot as well as some collateral work for print and billboards. I did a set of designs for Audi for their A3 and Q7 models. So I'll be talking about some kind of rapid concepting approaches for that. And this 3D spot for blankRepository, which is this online 3D food scan marketplace. And this 3D spot as well for Del Taco to launch their new turkey taco. So let's jump in here. And the first project I'll jump into is that Odwalla spot. So first, I'll kind of show you the spot and some of the collateral work. And the concept behind this was just to really show the ingredients, inside the fruit juices in this really fun and exciting way, while also making the product look, refreshing and enticing. So let me open this up here. So obviously, a lot of the heavy lifting behind this work was the design and the art direction, right? And with like product renders and specifically food renders, the most important thing is to make the food look enticing, make it look refreshing, make it look, cool and crisp. So a lot of the heavy lifting is done in that regard. And the animation is actually, kind of these straightforward techniques of uses within Cinema 4D. So these are kind of the initial look dev that I did to get all the assets in place, and then obviously modeling the bottles, and I even went out and kind of had to buy some of the fruit juices and scan all the labels and retouch them and get it all set up. So actually, a lot of the assets that were created for the 3D spot were then reused for the print campaign as well, which as a solo project, it really streamlined the workflow. So a lot of the same kind of kaleidoscopic explosions were repurposed for these as well. So I just wanted to dive in to some of the techniques behind approaching this. So let me open up this scene file here. And I'm using Octane for this, third-party renderer. So I'll just send this to render really quickly so we can have a look here. And right now, I just have some beginning fruit in the scene. So let me just resize this. And we can close this down. So I have this apple rotating and these strawberries, and we want to kind of introduce some more fruit and get these kind of kaleidoscopic explosions happening here. So I have a just simple raspberry setup, and I'll just grab a cloner. I'm clicking Shift-C here to bring up this dialog box that just makes it easier to type in what I'm looking for. And I'll drag in our raspberry, and we want to set this to radial. And I need to crank this down a bunch, I think about like 5. So we're starting to get what we're looking for here. And for a lot of this project, I used Greyscalegorilla's signal tag, which is a procedural approach to do animation. And it has a ton of great features that really makes this kind of like continuous animation really, it's just great for this type of a work. So I'm going to add in a signal tag here, and we're going to animate the radius. So we'll just grab the radius parameter, we'll drop it on top here. And I'm just going to quickly adjust the animation curve here so we get a much more interesting look. We'll kind of reset these end frames really quickly. And we have an explosion going on. But we want to introduce some rotation and just get some more interesting looks here. So under the coordinates of the cloner, I can start messing with the banking here. And I can drag that into a new tag. And I'm just going to use a linear spline preset just so it's constant over time. So we can use that. And then down here under the playback, we can set this to additive. So now, let me grab this here. So now it will continue over time, right? So it'll do that rotation amount and then just keep adding to it. So we can, let me change this maybe to like 180 and lower the frames. And then now we just get this kind of continual rotation. It's a little too fast. Maybe do like 100. And we have our rotation going on. But we want, it's actually a little bit too fast still. But we want, this kind of kaleidoscopic effect. So how we can do that is just start basically nesting some cloners here. So if I grab another cloner, we can make it a child of our parent one here, drop this in, and then we can adjust this one to be similar. So I'll make it radius, and we'll make this super small, I think like 1. Let's see if we got what we're looking for here. Yeah, so now we have these little clusters, right? We're starting to get these like firework explosion. And the cool thing is that within the cloner under the transform, you could even start animating the, let's see here, the rotation of this parent cloner to kind of get the entire cluster to rotate, as well as the child cloner to get some like individual rotation of the clones as well. I'm just going to zero these out here. But to get this kind of firework explosion, I'm just going to add another tag to the child cloner, and we'll drag in our radius here. And I'm going to set this up just pretty much the same as before. Adjust this really quickly. And maybe like 40. And we can utilize now this offset down here. So I can just offset the secondary explosion. So you'll see now that we have this first explosion, and then this, we'll slow down our viewport a little bit, but this kind of secondary firework explosion here. And then it comes into just layering on some additional fruit. So I also have a blueberry here. So we can, when I was approaching this, I kind of wanted to get a bunch of these different clusters and some more interesting variation between them. So what we can do is I can just actually copy out this cloner here, and we'll just delete everything within. And I can throw in this blueberry. So now we have this raspberry cluster and then a little blueberry within. So I can adjust the individual rotation. Maybe these blueberries are kind of facing camera a little bit better. And now we have our first explosion, the secondary explosion that also reveals the blueberry within. And then our viewport will update there. So once again, just the design and the art direction is doing a lot of the heavy lifting. So the animation techniques are are utilizing just standard tools within Cinema 4D. So I'm just going to close this down. I can quickly show final scene file of that shot that was utilized. Hopefully this will send to render fairly quickly, but it'll give me a chance to drink some water as well. All right, so now we have, you can see, just animating some different parameters in the cloner. I'll press play, so hopefully this will update. And we have some leaves, some seeds, just really showing off all the ingredients within the Odwalla fruit drinks. And the kind of concept behind this as well was all the different shots have different colors that kind of match the blend of ingredients for each specific product that they have. So that's the kind of approach behind a lot of the shots within the piece. I'm going to also go over real quickly of this hero shot. So both used in the print collateral as well was this hero shot of all the Odwalla bottles kind of moving along as the fruit constricts and kind of looks like it's like pulling it through, and the camera kind of banks right? So this is utilizing a lot of the same techniques again. So we have this helix here that's kind of wrapping around our bottles, and I'll resend this real quick. And we can grab a cloner again, and I have some blackberries here, and we can throw that in our cloner. Hopefully this will update shortly. And for object mode, or the object of the cloner, we're going to change this to object mode. And then we can drag in our helix here, and we start to get those blackberries kind of wrapping around the bottle, right? So we want to up the count. Hopefully this will be fairly quick. I can change this, rather than the distribution mode, I'm going to change to even, just to kind of even them out a little bit. And I think we need some more as well. And so now we wanted these blackberries to kind of wrap around and look like they're constricting. So how we can do that is you could, within the cloner, animate this rate, and you'll see that they'll kind of travel along. But we don't actually get the rotation of the helix as well. So how we can do that is actually, I think I'm going to close down this viewport just to be nice to our machine here. And then I can show the final shot there as well. Let me just undock this. There we go. So what we can do is, rather than using the rate, I can actually just animate the rotation of the helix, because then it's kind of this optical illusion effect, right, where it looks like the fruit is traveling along the bottle, and it looks like it's kind of rotating around. So what we can do is, once again, we're going to use signal tag, just because it makes the process really easy to tweak down the line. And I think as a solo freelancer too, it's really important to kind of future-proof your work and really be able to quickly adjust and address client feedback, because you'll get feedback quickly, and sometimes the time expectations are the same as if you were working with a team, right? So you need to future-proof your work as much as you can. So under here, I'm just going to set this, because we're going to basically make this constant over time again. So I'll set it to linear, and we can start to adjust this. I think we want positive values, but we'll see, it might be negative. And then we can lower the count a little bit. And for playback, I'm going to change it to additive once again, just so it'll just keep adding to that rotation amount. This is going to slow down. Actually, there we go. So now we are, kind of starting to get what we're looking for. It looks like the fruit is kind of pulling the bollos through. And just in the interest of time, I'll just quickly show some of the other kind of ways that I use to animate this. So in addition to that, we can also just start kind of banking these, right? Because then you get this nice kind of, it looks more like it's constricting around. And this is set up using the same way. So I'll just do that really quickly. We'll set this to linear. And I think pretty much the same will work. See. Additive. I'll crank this up a bit. And now we get them kind of rotating around, right? So it just adds some more interesting variation. You get more of the kind of look that it's actually pulling through the bottles. And what I wanted to do here is this scene, has some depth of field, and so we want some more fruit in the foreground and the background just to give a more interesting look. So I'll just quickly just copy these, and we can utilize the same setup pretty much. And I'll delete out these blackberries, and I have some green grapes here, and we can throw these in the cloner. And I'm just going to adjust this new helix here. So I think maybe like 5 on each, maybe even bigger, because we want these kind of traveling in front of the camera to get some nice depth of field. I can adjust the height a little bit. I think that's pretty good for our purposes for now. And under the cloner, I just dragged in our new helix, and then we have this all set up, right? So now we have some of the fruits traveling in the foreground and background, and with the depth of field, it just makes a huge difference. I'll actually play this real quick, show the shot here. So yeah, you see some of the fruit kind of traveling in the front and the back, and by using the by using the same helix for a lot of these, you can get some nice harmonious angles as well, just so they all kind of live nicely with each other. So that's the kind of a lot of the techniques used behind the spot, right? So I think, once again, if you're coming from a design background, it's really easy to kind of jump in and start creating work right away for commercial purposes. The next project that I wanted to jump into here is some work that I created for Audi. So Audi approached me to create a series of designs for their A3 and Q7 models, and they had some photography that they had taken, but they wanted to make it more visually engaging, make it more interesting, and so they needed me to basically pitch a bunch of different concepts for them to decide which fit their brand the best, right? And some of the concepts that came out of this were really quick turnaround. It's like a ton of concepts within a short amount of time. And so what they wanted to convey with the messaging here was that like the car was able to master the elements. It's out to take over the landscape. And I kind of approached different ways to convey that message, and having some topographic maps, having some like platforms here, even putting them in some more like realistic environments that kind of shows that they're able to stand up to heavy weather. And once again, it's like pitching this wide range of concepts within a short amount of time to be able to see which direction is the best for them. And one of the things that was important to be able to come up with concepts in such a quick turnaround is being able to do as much as possible in the render, right? So I wanted to get like 90% of this done in the render, so then the last 10% can be color grading, color correction, and then once a specific concept was signed off on, then spending time to actually do proper compositing. So it's basically this kind of rapid concepting with this approach to live compositing. And how I utilized that was basically using camera mapping. So I basically just took a lot of the photography that they provided to me and set it up within the scene. And so I'm just using a background object. So I just have a background object set up with our image. I'm just matching the camera as close as possible to the photography, and then setting up some daylights and camera and everything to kind of match the scene as well. And for this concept, I wanted to show that like the ground was hard to master, and the platforms underneath maybe the vehicles were more stable, and they were able to kind of transverse the environment really easily. So I'll just quickly throw something together here to show the camera mapping. So I can just grab a cube. I'll just quickly add a fillet just to give a nice edge here. And I'm going to grab a cloner again, and we'll throw this in. I'm going to set this to grid array. We can turn on render instances. Actually, we'll keep 3 there, and we can introduce some additional clones here. And I'm just going to drag out these values. I'll probably have to type them in because they're going to need to be pretty large. Even bigger. Basically just get some platforms going on here. And I'm going to utilize a random effector just to like randomize the size and the position of these. And for the scale, I'll turn on the scale, but I actually want to keep it ununiform because I want to get some differing cubes here. So we start to get some different shapes, and I can drag this out some more, kind of give some spacing here. Adjust some of these. I think we need a little bit more clones as well. This here. So we're starting to obviously spend some more time kind of finessing this here. We're starting to get at least some platforms going on here. And right now, you know, it's not integrating with the scene very nicely, right? And we don't have a material, and we could spend some time building out a material to match the snow. But especially with this client, they were very interested in keeping as much photography as possible. They really liked the photography. They just wanted to, you know, amplify it and elevate it a little bit further. So it was keeping as much as possible. So how I did that was utilizing this kind of live compositing. So I just have this ground texture here, and I'll show you how this is kind of built out. So I'm using the same image just piped into the diffuse here. Octane uses this node editor, so we just have these kind of nodes set up here, and I'm piping the same image for the background into the diffuse, and then we're just there's these two channels for transform and projection. And the projection here is basically just set to the camera. So it's able to have the same texture wherever my camera is set up, just flatly projected to the camera, right? And then here I have a transform node to just kind of retransform it to fit it within the aspect ratio that I have set up. So I'll just drop this onto our cloner here, and you'll see we're getting that snow texture back in. We're getting the same color. We're getting everything kind of in the viewport. And this just helps a ton with, you know, pitching as many concepts within a short amount of time. So, and you can even, I just kind of did a little stripped down version here, but you could, you know, utilize the camera mapping for displacement, for the bump, whatever you would like to really get some of that texture back in. So when you're trying to composite in 3D elements into photo scenes, it just saves a ton of time, because a lot of these concepts are just to sell to the client, sell the idea across, and then once, you know, they sign off on it, then spending some more time here. So I can load up one of the versions of the scene, and here it's basically the same setup. I'm just, you know, utilizing some plane effectors to scale up the blocks underneath the cars to really show that they're on like a stable platform, right? And just really drive home the message that was important to them. And this is, you know, using the same technique, but basically having these kind of topographic platforms. And you can see by matching the lighting as close as possible, matching the camera, and then utilizing the camera mapping within the texture, this just really quickly and really easily integrates your 3D assets within the scene, which saves a ton of time when trying to pump out a bunch of concepts within a short turnaround, right? And this was basically a lot of the approach to the 3D concepts that I pitched to them. And funnily enough, at the end of the project, I had done kind of a Hail Mary and pitched to them this 2D concept of these kind of hand-drawn environmental elements, these topographic maps and kind of UI with these small like bursts of gold. And this was the concept that the client felt best matched their brand look and feel. So funnily enough, they signed off on a 2D concept here. And these are some of the final designs. This was the first one that I pitched, and then, or obviously a much less refined version of this one, and then some of the others as well. So having, you know, really showing the kind of modern explorer out to master the elements, and, you know, these kind of hand-drawn sketches that you would imagine maybe be in a book as he travels along. And so having the river here, a waterfall, and you know, other elements as well. And after the client signed off on this project, I knew I wasn't the right person to, you know, illustrate all these elements here, the, you know, the hero image for each design. And luckily enough, I know a illustrator who's extremely talented, very versatile. So huge shout out to Brittany England for collaborating with me on this project. You can check out her work at brittanyengland.com. And full discretion, she is also my girlfriend as well. So the next project I wanted to jump into, I'm going to close all these down here, is blankRepository approached me to create a basically a kind of hero animation to showcase all their different 3D food scans. And if you're not familiar with blankRepository, they are a high quality 3D food scan website. They have a ton of scans for sale. They have some as free as well, so definitely check them out. And when they approached me, it was basically this kind of open brief of just showcase our scans as best as possible. And these are the projects, that are really fulfilling, really fun to work on, because going from initial concept to final production is just really satisfying. And the concept that I came up with behind the work is to really showcase how it felt to first scroll through their website and really have all these different high quality food scans there, in this online banquet buffet, fresh for the picking, and they're all kind of there frozen in time. So I tried to show this kind of food paradise that it felt like when going through their website. And so I'll show the final animated spot here, and then I'll kind of jump into some of the techniques behind it. Yeah, so the kind of main technique behind this, I'm not going to go much into the environment creation, but it was also this, kind of the focus of it is this kind of wave that travels across the table to explode the foods, right? So I'll kind of dive into actually how straightforward that is to create within Cinema 4D and kind of get this cool wave explosion that travels across here. So let me jump in real quickly to a kind of stripped down version of the scene. I think I'll be able to send this to render without much problem. But I have just a sphere to kind of play a role as one of the pieces of food, just to be nice to our demo computer here. And we can utilize dynamics to set up the banquet buffet, right? So I have just a cloner set up here as grid array, and we can drop in the sphere to represent our apple. And what we want to do is to make this kind of more natural is, first add a random effector to kind of get some differentiating scale. I'm going to turn off the position. And we want to keep it uniform and just add a little bit, maybe a little bit more difference between the pieces of food. And obviously, because it's a perfect sphere, you're not going to be able to see much rotation, but if these were actual apples or other pieces of fruit, you'd introduce some rotation as well to get some varying amounts. And what we want to do is start to get our dynamics set up. So I can select both these, and we'll add a rigid body tag. And for this one, we just need to first check on individual elements, make sure that's on there. And before we press play, we need to make sure that none of these are colliding all, right? Because then they'll just explode out really quickly. And so we can also utilize a push apart effector. So what that'll do is if I add this in, they all kind of push apart all the way, but I can crank this down a little bit. And it'll just make sure that we're not getting any intersections. So to kind of make it easier to set all these fruit bowls up and make sure we're not getting intersections so they don't just explode out right away. And if I press play now, you'll see that it's not working how we want. The collision isn't set up properly. So if I go to our bowl, right now the collision is set to automatic. We want to set it to moving mesh because eventually this bowl is going to be moving. And it'll calculate this more accurately. So now we're kind of getting what we're looking for. And to set up all these different bowls of food, it's as simple as selecting both these tags. We can go to our dynamics and utilize this set initial state. So if we click that, now when we go to the beginning of our animation, that's our initial state. And we can even let this play out a couple times and keep clicking it just to make sure that they're all kind of nestled nicely together the way that we want them. And that's kind of how we can set up all our different bowls of fruit. So for the final one, we had a loaf of bread with different slices. So setting that up with a different cloner, and even a bunch of slices of cake in a formation, and using Radial for that, and taking some time to really get all our different food set up in this nice buffet. So that's kind of a straightforward way to get all our bowls of food set up. So I have another scene file here. of just a few different bowls of food. And I can quickly show how to get that wave to travel across the table. So what we're going to do here is I'm actually going to use a attractor. So I can add this in, if I can spell it right. There we go. And this will attract by default, but if we pump in a negative value, so I'll pump in maybe like negative 2,000, it'll actually repel. And I want this, I have a null here just for the center of our table. So if I make the attractor a child of the null that I have set up, I can utilize reset PSR to reset the position and rotation to that null, and then I can grab it out now. So now we have the attractor set up. If I press play, you see they all kind of just fly away. But we want to isolate them to each specific bowl of food. So I'm going to kind of place this under here. We need to add a fall-off just so we get a nice kind of slow push rather than across the board. So we have our spherical fall-off. You'll see now it's working, but it's affecting all of them, and it's not exactly what we're looking for. So let me reposition this a little bit. And once again, we can utilize a signal tag because this will make it easier to kind of offset all our animations. And I'm going to drag in our Y position, and we can just adjust this curve really quick, kind of similar to before. And I can lower the frame amount a little bit. So now we get our kind of push up, right? And I can actually have that move a little bit further. But it's still affecting all the bowls. So it's pretty straightforward on how we can isolate it to what we're looking for. I'll select all our dynamics tags of all our different food, all our different bowls there. And then if we go under the forces, right now it's set to exclude. So anything I drag in there, it'll exclude. When working with, I think in the final piece I had, maybe 30 or 40 different sets of food. So it's easier to just kind of set this to include, so then only what I drag in will be calculated, right? So I can select the first set here and drag in our attractor. And now if I press play, we're isolating it just to that first one. But right now, the food and the bowl is like sticking together too much. Like we want them to kind of travel out in this fun and interesting way. So what we can do is for the bowl here, I can just increase this. I have some damping, which will just basically drain out some of that energy so it won't be able to move as much. Just basically increase some of that. And then for this one, I can maybe lower it down even more. Because then the bowl will have more energy drained out of it. So then the food, it'll kind of come to a rest a little bit more easily. And then the food will be able to travel out, and you'll just get a much more interesting look. So we can see if we crank this up enough to, we're starting to get it here. I think I need to also shorten this amount so we get more of a quicker burst. Let's see if this is closer to what we're looking for here. We're starting to get it. And I think the other thing too is to not, you want to get some more interesting variation of how it pushes up. So not having it directly under the bowl, because then you just get it to kind of push up and it's not as interesting. If you kind of offset it so you get more of a push from one direction or the other, it's just a much more interesting look. So see already we're getting, a much cooler animation here. So I think that's close enough to just kind of for demoing purposes. But now we can start to layer up the others, right? So I'll just copy out this attractor. So we have a few others set up, and I can add them to this next set here, and then this last one, I can add in this attractor here. And I just need to replace them really quickly, so we can move this over. And to get some more interesting variation, I'll try to hit them at different angles so that maybe even fly into each other a little bit as well. We can see if this is closer to what we're looking for. Oh, I missed that one. Let me move this one here. This one's too far out. Let's see. There we go. Cool. So now we can, introduce, to get that wave to travel along, we can introduce some offsets. So I'm just going to grab this one. Within the signal tag, there's this offset down here. I can just add a little bit, maybe 5 frames to that and 10 to there. So now if I press play, we get this kind of wave that travels along. And that's basically, the approach behind just kind of setting up all the different bowls of food, setting up the offsets in different ways to get more interesting variation between them. And I have a cached version of the final effect, just stripped down without all the environment and everything. And I won't send this to render because I don't want to have you guys waiting too long. But if I press play, This is basically, hopefully it'll catch up here. Here we go. So this is basically, the final animation here, and once again, like the art direction and like the design behind it and the concept is really doing a lot of the heavy lifting. A lot of the techniques aren't super intensive. Cinema 4D has a wonderful tool set to really allow you to jump in and start creating work if you're interested in getting into 3D, right? So one last project I wanted to jump into was this 3D animation that I created for Del Taco. And there's just some interesting environment creation techniques behind it to really make it art-directable, really make it easy to adjust to client feedback. And the concept behind the piece was basically Del Taco was launching this turkey taco, and they wanted to show that it's like full of flavor but less fat. And to convey that in this kind of comical way. So you see the taco from the flat angle, and as it kind of travels around, it reveals that because it's less fat, it's this super skinny taco in actual. So I'll show the final piece, and we can jump into some of the environment creation techniques and stuff. Cool. So super short, just kind of a social piece that they have me create. And the approach to environmental stuff was just to kind of allow me to really make it art-directable, because I needed to have this taco kind of nestled in this landscape. So let me open this up here, and I can jump in here. So open up my live viewer. And right now I just have a plane subdivided with pretty straightforward environmental texture. And I'll send this to render real quick. And what I want to do here is to give me much more hands-on control of creating the environment. So what we can do is I'm just going to grab a displacer here, and we'll throw it under our plane. And what you might, initial approach would be to maybe throw a noise into the shading, but I'm just going to throw a white color here, and we'll crank up the height as well. Might be too much, but we'll see. And so we just have a flat color white in the shading, but under the fall off, I'm going to set this to noise fall off, which is new to R19, and I've been using it a ton on a bunch of different projects. So similar to my personal project or my talk on personal projects, I jumped into why the noise fall off is so powerful, and it's these display options down here really is why I love it so much. So I can turn off the X display, turn on the Y, and I'll basically crank this up here to 1,000. Don't need too much there. And if I jump out of my camera, I can pull up this displacer, and you'll see that we're getting a very one-to-one understanding of how the noise is being applied to our environment compared to pumping it in directly to the shading. This gives me much more hands-on understood control of how this noise is being applied. So then we can adjust this as well. Maybe crank up the global scale a bit. We'll change the noise type. And if I start to adjust this, if I start to clip the values, do whatever I'd like, you can visualize it in the viewport really easily. So it just makes environment creation a lot quicker for building out these different landscapes. And you see already this is looking pretty good. And then the cool thing is that you can drag out this displacer. I could add a secondary noise and scale it down, but I could even just change this fall off to sphere, and we'll just have to adjust this to smooth it out. I'll crank up the fall off just to make it a little bit more natural. And now I have a hill that I can move around and adjust within the scene. And this was just really important to quickly, a lot of these solo freelance projects have really quick turnarounds, and just being able to tackle the client's needs really quickly. So now, for nestling that taco in there, I can drag out as many hills as I'd like, and place another one over here. I can do and start layering on the noises as well to get some more interesting looks. And it's just a really hands-on, really easy to understand way to build your environment. So this was kind of the approach to getting the base landscape set up, and then I want to show how to utilize this in combination with Octane Scatter as well. So Octane Scatter is within Octane, you're basically able to, let me close this down. I'll open up my next scene here. you're basically able to populate a lot of different clones across your landscape. But you'll see here all these little splines that are across the landscape, and that's all my plants and all my trees kind of populating within the scene. And because it's on render side, it's just super light, super easy to adjust, and you can use it with effectors. So I was even, as it got closer to this lake here, having the, scaling the trees down, so you're not immediately close to the center lake. And this will take a minute to denoise, but we can start to get a look at it. And in combination with, the noise fall-off approach to building out the landscapes, and then having this way to really quickly and lightly populate our clones of our plants, and then having the plane effectors to be able to, scale down and adjust them as you'd like, was just a really fast way to approach environment creation. So I can jump into a few different angles of the shots as well. And one of the kind of other things that I quickly wanted to touch on is I see a lot when you build kind of environments out. I'll set up my lights, and I have some volumetric set up for some atmospheric haze to give kind of a more natural look, and kind of leaving it there, right? So then your lighting ends up actually being really flat, because in reality, I have this backplate here of these clouds, but it's just a backplate. Like, it's not affecting the lighting at all. And in a real kind of natural environment, you get these kind of pockets of light as the light is occluded as it passes through, different densities of clouds. So you get just this more dynamic light. You would get this more interesting light as, certain pockets were able to get through, and then having darker areas as well. So how I approach that is, if I jump onto my camera here, you can see I just have a bunch of, it won't show up too much in the viewport here, but I just have a bunch of spheres set to different opacities, different sizes, to just basically occlude the light in different ways. So you get these really nice pockets of golden light that are able to get through. And it just makes the lighting much more dynamic, rather than, having it, unless it's a very clear day and you don't have any clouds, then you would have more interesting dynamic pockets there. So that's basically a lot of the approach behind the environment creation. And just to wrap up, I just wanted to talk on how many wonderful tools there are within Cinema 4D for efficiency, which I really appreciate, once again, as solo freelancer, being able to future-proof my work, being able to address things quickly. So I'll pause this here, and we can open up a final version of the scene here. And so I won't go too in-depth into a lot of these, because Cineversity has some great documentation about it. But I just wanted to touch on them briefly, because it really is one of the programs that has so many tools to make it really easy and really make my life a lot easier and a lot funner. So the layer system down here, you can see I broken out all the different elements within layers, which just makes it really quick to kick out Play Blast, or if I'm working on just specifically modeling the taco and being able to solo that out, it makes a huge difference there. The take system up here, for this project and for a lot of projects, you can see I have this kind of wide, which is for pre-roll on YouTube that they used, and then also needed to kick out a square format for social media platforms. And just being able to create a second take, readjust the title cards within the title safe area, and then down the line, if I had to make changes to the taco, make anything, those aren't within my take, so those just live update, and just makes it so much easier down the line when making client feedback and just having that update very easily. One of the other things that I use a ton and just really saves my life all the time is the token system. It's a plugin through Cineversity, but just being able to basically set up tokens for any of these parameters. So you can see hour, minute, month, and so I don't have to name, if I'm just kicking out a bunch of quick renders, test renders, play blast, whatever it is, I don't have to name every single render. I can just set it up. So right now I have it set up for camera, the take, the resolution, the month, the date, the hour, the minute. And I can just click render whenever I need to without having to worry about overriding, without having to worry about renaming, and just get all those within my render folder, which just saves me a ton of headaches. A few other things I just quickly wanted to shout out is selection object is absolutely amazing. I know a lot of times when you're working on scenes, you'll have to, so like for example, if I just needed to select all these scatters, you keep having to jump down into your hierarchy and select all these different things, right? So I'm like, oh, I need to adjust all these, whatever you're having to select, and I adjust some parameters, and then a few minutes later, I'm like, oh, I need to tweak that again, and I have to go back within the hierarchy and select it again. If you just utilize a selection object, I add that in, now I have all those object selected. I can close my hierarchies. I never have to go down there again if I don't want to. And I have a selection object up here. I can rename it. These are all my plant scatters. I even got my camera in here. I didn't want that. I can delete it out. And now anytime I need to make those changes, so a lot of times I'll have literally 20 different selection objects for every little thing, and it just saves so much time. You'd be surprised all the little things that you keep going back to select over and over again. And I can just restore my selection, make my changes, click away, not have to worry about it. It just saves so much time. There's a ton of other things as well. I use vertical tags a lot. For example, if I wanted to select all these tags and search for them, I mean, I could open this eyedropper here, jump into my tags, and kind of select them that way. But if I just wanted to search for them, I can't search for them because they're not, actually in the hierarchy. But what I can do is, if you go to view and turn on these vertical tags, let me exit this out. You'll see now they're nested in the hierarchy. So now they're actually, in a folder in the tag as a child of every object. So they're actually in there now. So I can, search specifically what I'm looking for. There they are. Select them. Maybe set up a selection object for them, and I'm good to go. So just wanted to shout out a few efficiency things. Once again, check out Cineversity. They have a ton of documentation on this stuff. But just, I really appreciate this program, and it really allows me to quickly address client feedback, which is really important. So just to wrap up here, I just want to touch on a few things that I've learned just since having to tackle all these freelance projects, and I want to talk about them a little bit. So you often hear within design that limits breed creative solutions, right? If you just have the world is your oyster, the client just says make whatever you want, you'll often make really uninspired work because you're not having anything to push off of, you're not having anything to solve against. And I think that by that same token, your own limitations can breed more creative solutions, right? If you lean into them, if you treat them as a design solution to solve against and to make to your own advantage, it makes a huge difference. So, lean into your limitations. They really are super valuable if you treat them that way. Divide and conquer. When starting a project, I'll literally break things down as minute and as small as possible, both in terms of the process of art direction, animation style, everything I need, and break it down and build mood boards for every little thing. It just as the smaller that I can divide things down, the easier it is to tackle. And that also applies for solving technical problems within Cinema 4D. If you can you have this big effect that you're trying to achieve, whatever it is, break it down into small parts. Cinema 4D is built beautifully for kind of solving problems in that way. So divide and conquer is something I really live by. Front load the work. If I have 2 weeks to work on a project, I'll spend 1 week just doing look development, just doing R&D, because it'll pay you back tenfold down the line. You spend so much time just kind of smoothing things out, so then it just makes it, you end up saving so much time as you move forward. So give your look development some love, give your R&D some love. It'll really pay you back tenfold. So yeah, thank you so much. If you guys want to check out my work, you can check it out at zacharycorzine.com. And I post a lot of personal work and some client stuff as well as at Zach Darren on Instagram. So thanks again to Maxon for having me, all the amazing people within the community. I can't thank you guys enough. Thank you.